Hello, we are live. Hi, everyone. My name is Donnesha, and this is our Smart Brown Girl um, book discussion for Women of Brewster Place. So I see one person is tuning in, so hello there. I'm going to actually pull it up from my side of things so I can see what's going on. Isha, and this is our Smart Brown Girl. Sorry. So if you can hear me, hello, Chris. How are you? Can you all hear me? Welcome. I'm just trying to still get my bearings here. Welcome to our book discussion for the Women of Brewster Place. We will get started shortly. Ooh, I'm excited. Hi, Amani, Ashley, Kendra. How's it going? All right. So I'm not going to take too long to wait for people to come in. I'm pretty sure people will come in whenever they get here. So thank you for being with me on Saturday. You could have been anywhere else, but you're here to talk about the first two chapters. Well, I guess it would be like a prologue and then the first chapter of Women of Brewster Place. So this is my copy. It's a used copy of the book, and so hopefully the page numbers are consistent. So first of all, if you haven't purchased the syllabus to the Women of Brewster Place, please do. The link should be in the little caption for this live. So please head over to smartbrowngirl.com and purchase the syllabus, okay? And so I'm going to start off with providing just a little bit of background about Naylor. I'm pretty sure you could have read it yourselves, but if you haven't started the book or whatever, I'm just going to go ahead and just read it. And today's syllabus was created by Bree Reed. And I think Morgan actually edited it. So thank you for all of your lovely questions, Bree. And so I'm excited to just work from there. So Gloria Naylor was born in 1950. She's the daughter of sharecroppers, and she migrated to New York City during the Great Migration. And so as a young girl, her mother encouraged her to journal, and that sparked an interest in creative writing. And that's where she began to explore writing poetry and short stories. So she graduated from Brooklyn College with a degree in English in 1981, and a year later, she published The Women of Brewster Place. And then a year after that, in 1983, she actually won the National Book Award for the book. She cites Alice Walker, Zora Neale Hurston, and Toni Morrison, who we've read earlier this year in the book club, as some of her influences. And another note is that she had a master's degree in African American Studies from Yale University, and she taught at New York University and Cornell, in addition to other institutions. And so she focuses on the lived experiences of Black women, and she interrogates the impacts of things like respectability, love, poverty, and geography on their lives. So that's just a little bit about Naylor. Awesome. So for those of you all who are joining us today, for me, I watched the miniseries before I watched the book. So I'm curious to know if any of you, what order did you read or watch the series? If you did both, or if you, so have you read the book first? And what kind of impact did that have on you all as you were reading? Or if you watched the series first, what impact did that have on you? For me, I personally watch the series first because I heard about it. Somebody was talking about it on a podcast. I was like, let me just look it up. And so it was free on Amazon. And so I just watched the series first. And then I was like, oh, it's a book. And so I ended up, I don't even think I actually, Tanish, you watched the series a few months ago. Yeah, like I watched it maybe a few weeks before we announced that this was the next book. And so, yeah, and when I found out that we were reading, I was really excited. But one of the things that I noticed is that it was hard for me to actually visualize some of the things that they were describing in the book. Like I couldn't really visualize Brewster Place without thinking like, oh, the one that was in the series, or like Maddie Michael, for example, is just Oprah. Like I couldn't even imagine a person that I like in my head. And I think sometimes like it does kind of taint your, I don't know, perspective if you've seen the show or TV, like the show or the movie before you've read the book, because you're like trying to match everything like scene for scene. And so, yeah, let me know what was your reading experience like in either reading it or watching it first. And so some of the things that I wanted to, talk about or offer is a trigger warning. So, there's a lot of instances of child abuse, intimate partner violence, death, and sexual violence in this novel. And so, just take care of yourselves as you're reading. It's a shorter book. Like, I mean, it's pretty short, but it's so heavy in some instances and pretty much throughout that it really is like you gotta take your time. So I don't know how to click and view the comments. I'm still pretty new at this. So it says, do I drag the comments? Natasha, you said you watched the series but barely remember it. You liked how poetic the book is written. Yeah, I agree. I did the same. The first book came first. The book came first, but because I saw the miniseries first, I was comparing the book to the miniseries, saying, yeah, me too. I definitely prefer reading before seeing movies. Vanessa, you said definitely prefer reading before seeing the movie shows because, as you said, it definitely changes the experience because you can't separate them. Yeah, it's really difficult. So it said, Dara, you said you watched it in the 90s as a kid, and it's a very different experience reading it as a woman in your 30s. Yes, yeah. Well, on a similar note, like that's the same. I think that's the way I felt even when reading like things like Toni Morrison's work too. Like The Bluest Eye. The first time I read it, I was way too young, and I was like a freshman in high school, and just it was way too complex. And then reading it as a 30-year-old, it's like wow, like. You just have a different experience and you have a little bit of time to think about, how these things shape your own experiences in life. So let's keep going here. So the story starts off, or Naylor starts off with an epigraph from Langston Hughes, who was a prominent poet in the Harlem Renaissance, queer, Black male during the Harlem Renaissance. And she starts off with Dream Deferred. And I think every like Black child who went to a public school had to learn a Dream Deferred in some way. Like I remember in my drama class having to like read that or memorize it for something. So she starts it off with that poem. And so one of the questions that Bree asks in the syllabus is, what connections can we make between the epigraph and the ending of Dawn that begins the novel? And she takes the excerpt from page 5 and she says, they were hard-edged, soft-centered, brutally demanding, and easily pleased, these women of Brewster Place. They came, they went, grew up, and grew old beyond their years, like an ebony phoenix each in her own time and with her own season had a story. So what do you think are some of the connections between that epigraph and even this last like quote here? Like, what does that bring up for you all? One of the things that I said was that when I think about like things like hard-edged and soft-centered, like even just thinking about like contradictions, and I think we'll read this. I don't think we'll read this in Black Feminist Thought, but it's like toward the middle where Patricia Collins talks about Black women as a set of contradictions and how we should accept that. Like a lot of times our contradictory, the ways that we like move throughout the world can be seemingly contradictory, but how we should embrace that and not use that to diminish Black women and their knowledge and their lived experiences. So that's one of the things I thought about. And just like the whole idea of a dream deferred, like just thinking about some of the women and all of the women in their stories. But I think I'll keep it to like Maddie Michael here. Just thinking about like what her life could have been like. Because I think that a dream deferred is really talking about like how our dreams are, can be haven't been actualized. And so what happens to those things when we haven't realized our dreams? Yep. So we're going to move on. I'm going to skip past some of these questions that Bree wrote because I think, like, for example, the one about dusk, I think we should probably wait till Morgan talks about that in the last chapter. But I want to skip through and ask this question to you all. So Dawn is really talking about the whole setup, like how Brewster Place came to be. And so the first thing she says is on page 1, Brewster Place was the bastard child of several clandestine meetings between the alderman of the 6th District and the managing director of Unico Realty Company. And so one of the things that she asks is, how does Brewster Place fit into a broader conversation about housing in the United States? And so one of the things that Dara, you responded to the last one. Yep, A Dream Deferred reminds me of Missed Possibilities, but the book demonstrates that the women continued to make life as best they could. Exactly. I agree with you. Yeah. And so, like, thinking about the conversation about hood feminine, like, I'm really glad, and I know Julesy is pretty strategic about, and just the syllabus cohort, I think, is pretty strategic about the books that we're reading. And so I think having read this following hood feminism is really critical because I think like it sets us up to kind of think through what this book is helping us to see. But I'm going to go through some of the comments that you all had here. Okay, Kendra, you said it reminded me of the history of how housing was created for white families. Absolutely, yes. And yeah, I didn't know. Amani, you said for Maddie, at least thinking about the poem, she does feel like a true personification of what happens when, for some reason or another, your goals are put on hold or completely changed. Yeah, or complete change. Yeah. Yep. And then Vanessa, you're talking about, it makes me think that we set up public housing, which is already limited, but neglect the community in there, including the building. Absolutely. So just even like for me, I think I thought a lot about like just thinking about like local politics and like how housing, I think Alana said this like when we were talking about hood feminism, just like housing, education, politics, like economics, these things are all connected. And so, like, oftentimes housing is created like based on conversations that people who are actually living in those houses are not even like aware of, right? So like this secret meeting happens, and it's not about the people who live there or who would live there. It's literally about like, I need to do somebody a favor. I need to kick this person out of office because they're not taking bribes, and so we just need to create this space. And so and it also reminded me of something that Mickey Kendall said, and I think this is also in line with like Jules's work on focus on the state, where she talks about local and state politics. It's like a lot of us think that, you know, we're supposed to just vote and that's it. And then, you know, Kendall was talking about like you have to go to those boring like city council meetings because those are where decisions are made. And you know, we think federally like our laws are supposed to like, we're supposed to focus on those things, but also thinking about like how can we think about our everyday lives and how people make decisions about that. So I'm going to read some more comments. Dara said, I love the discussion of public housing how public housing comes to be. It's not some kind of act of benevolence, but quite strategic. It then leaves Black women to force powers to follow up on the promise of what public housing was supposed to represent. Absolutely. I think also the description of the superintendent was interesting too, and maybe a reflection of the neighborhood. Yes. Can you say some more about that? Like, and then Kendra, you said exactly. The beginning really demonstrated how local officials impact us and our communities. I also enjoyed Jules's focus on the state series. So informative. Yes, I was out here like, I'm just failing. I gotta go to a meeting or something because I have no idea what's going on in my local, in my town as it relates to anything. But I think it's really encouraging, and I think it's important during this time. So definitely go check it out on YouTube if you haven't already. All right, let's move on. So Brewster Place, so there's a quote on page 4. It says that Brewster Place knew that unlike its other children, the few who would leave forever were to be the exception rather than the rule, since they came because they had no choice and would remain for the same reason. So what do you think she's talking about when she says that unlike its other children, few would leave, or the people who would leave would be an exception? Oh, Amani, you're following up. The super was described as a man who could get things done, but a known drunk. Okay, I get you. Yes, absolutely. So one of the things, and I'm probably going to get a little theoretical, but just bear with me while I like, because I like doing stuff. Like if you, once you get, I guess if you know me, I'm a person who's like, oh, this reminded me of this other text that I read. Like, and I think that's just because I'm trained that way. So I do have a PhD in women's studies. And so we're just trained to always think about like how it connects to other things and other readings, and sometimes to a fault, because then we don't actually connect it to our personal experience, and that becomes like a problem, especially when you're like, okay, Black feminism is about the lived experience, and then here we are talking about things sort of like abstractly. But one of the things that I thought about was a reading or a book by Beth Ritchie, and Dara says, it sounds like the story of Black upward mobility. Absolutely, yes. And one of the things that I thought about when people don't leave is Beth Ritchie's work on arrested justice, Black women, violence in the America's prison nation. And one of the things she talks about is living in small geographic areas and how that creates this sort of like feeling of insularity. And so in the book, and I just wrote from it, she says, it's a peculiar social fact regarding race and class segregation in this country that many people who live in large urban areas tend to be confined to relatively small geographic areas. They tend not to cross this invisible but nevertheless clear boundaries that separate neighborhood groupings, and they do not engage equally in the life of the city. And so she argues this feeling of insularity can create this strong community ties, which exasperates the trap of loyalty. And really what she's talking about is like sort of why she's trying to argue like why Black women oftentimes just don't report, like don't call the police, and this sort of like communal ties within that, and especially when it relates to like violence against them and by the hands of Black men, right? Like not going to do that in this sort of place because this trap of loyalty, it sort of creates this code of silence. And, I mean, it is what it is. So that's kind of what came to mind when I thought about like this idea of like people not leaving or are not necessarily the rule. Like you're not, you kind of get caught up in this environment. But take it or leave it, you can agree or not with Beth Ritchie's work, but I think it's an interesting argument that she makes. And Kendra, you said it seemed like a comparison between the immigrant white families that moved away and Black families that moved there and stayed. Yes. And she talks about in Dawn, like just this sort of like the way that the neighborhood changes throughout. So first you get the Mediterranean folks, and then you get like Ben, who comes to the neighborhood, right? But then it starts off being about for the patriotic boys that were coming home from the war, right? And then finally she talks about how these brown women, or I can't remember what page she said this about, and I should have marked it, but how they started to come and they stayed in the neighborhood. All right, this is a long comment. Let's see, from Fatima. I'm just going to read it because I didn't do a run through on how to, it's hard when you've never done this before on how to drag the comments to the screen for people to see. And so maybe this is how it is. So it says, Fatima says, Brewster Place is being described as a place community to start or to have your roots, and you may move and come back or move far away or never leave your base. I think it sounds like any home, microcosmically at the community in general, macrocosmically. And I'm reminded of chapter 1 of Black Feminist Thought, where Hills talks about the dialectic of Black women feminism, Black women feminism as subjugating and activist, subjugating in that Black people live in an isolated community and rather by choice as ghettotized neighborhoods are segregated. Yeah. Yes. So let's see here. So this one I think makes it helps us to, this next question helps us to think about like the personal connection to this. So thinking about your own neighborhood, what is your neighborhood's history? What communities lived there 10 years ago or 20 years ago? And how do you see that changing? And how might you compare like what you see in Brewster Place in comparison to your own personal experience? So for me, I'm from Flint, Michigan, and I lived on the north side of Flint for a couple of years growing up, and I think it would be considered the hood. And we moved to a relatively middle-class neighborhood when I was about 9. So in that neighborhood, you definitely saw people who were well off, like middle-class people. A lot of the people lived in or worked for the Board of Education. A lot of them were teachers at the local high school or the elementary school. And then as I got older, a lot of those people started moving away. I mean, my neighbor was like an old white lady, and she was in a retirement home. And then this young black couple moved out into the suburbs. And so then we started getting different neighbors that started to look like me. Yay, Michigan. Are you from Michigan, Fatima? Fatima? And so, yeah, so they started to, our neighborhood became what would be considered a working class neighborhood. And I remember just my mom complaining about the neighbors and how sketchy they were and things like that, and getting my car broken into and being like, well, yeah, that's just going to be a loss because who's going to call the police? So I just remember like our neighborhood sort of shifting during that time. But if you want to talk about your neighborhood, we can keep on moving on to Maddie Michael's chapter, because I think this is a big part of the book, and it also has the most real estate. Oh, you live in Maryland. Oh, okay. I used to live in Maryland too, like for six and a half years. Yes, I lived in PG County. Yeah, it was a good time. And so Maddie Michael's chapter has a lot of real estate. And even if you watch the series, you realize like, oh, this is going on for a long time. So we'll talk about her. And so Natasha, the county that I lived in is, these comments are coming up fast. The county that I lived in is less desired now. But I know from my daughter doing all-star cheerleading that many of the bougie white moms grew up in my county south of Atlanta. So it's definitely flipped to a black county. Okay, yeah, yep. I grew up in D.C. near Howard University in the early 90s, and mostly black at that point. But as some may have read, the area has become quite gentrified, and white folks walking their dogs on campus. Yes, I've heard about. Well, I lived near D.C., so I heard about that too. So there was a huge shift. Yes, and then wasn't there something about like, some students like brought it up, like, can you please not do this on our campus? And there was this whole like falling out. Oh, gentrifiers. So yeah, definitely. And let's see. So yeah, Maddie Michael's chapter. Let's move on if you all don't have any other things about that. But the scene starts, or the story of her life starts at the sort of at the end, or at the point in which she arrives at Brewster Place, right? And so she is pulling up. She just moved away from, yes, the issues with the go-go. Yep. Oh my gosh. I remember that. But yeah, so she pulls up. She just moved out from her home that she lived in for 30 years with Miss Eva. And she, lost the home because her son, she put her house up for his bail. She posted bail with her house, and he did not show up for his court appearance. He disappears, and so she lost her house, and so now she has to move to Brewster Place. And so the quote that says, she pitied them, and so she's talking about in reference to her plants, because she sees this big wall that's built, and she looks at it and she realizes that it blocks her window, and her plants aren't going to live. And like, as a plant lady, y'all see my plants back here. It broke my heart, because I was like, well, yeah, her plants are definitely going to be struggling a little bit. But she says she pitied them because she refused to pity herself and think that she too would have to die here on this crowded street, because there wasn't enough life left for her to do it all again. And so one of the questions that is in the syllabus is how much do you think must be left in how much life do you think must be left in order for someone to start a new one? And in your opinion, what is needed to start a new life? And so, yeah, this made me kind of think about like we live in like a very youth centric like society where like your level, like your ability to produce is really about how young you are. Like how young you are really signals like to people how you're able to produce, whether that's like produce like children or produce like work or other things. And so like a lot of people think like when you get older, somehow you are supposed to just like stop living. And I really have a problem with that because I think like, especially with women of color, Black women, like, you know, white men get to start over like all the time. And, you know, I mean, hence, that's why we, you know, Bernie, you know, Joe, our 45, all of them are old as hell. And, you know, they get to start over and start new political careers, reinvent themselves, like all of these things. And so I think that, you know, sometimes it's like, it's not, we don't get that same privilege to do that, or people, we don't think we can. So Tanish, you said, I think that you just I can't read today. I think you have to just have a will to live. Life begins again with major changes. Absolutely. And I feel like this time in our lives, like the, you know, coronavirus, like I think those things are really showing us that, you know, really putting things into perspective for a lot of people too. Dara, you said, I love this book. That this book is in some ways also about Black women aging. Yes. But all of these women are constantly remaking themselves, and what the return to community seems to present as well. Yes. Yeah, like it is a commentary on aging and like, you know, thinking about like what do we do with our elders? Do we just throw them away? Do we, you know, because I'm skipping ahead, but even just thinking about Etta Mae, like her consciousness about her aging body, and just her awareness of that, but how she sort of chooses to be like, nah, I'm about to live my life. Yeah, ageism. Thank you. I haven't finished the book and didn't see the show, but I so also didn't imagine her that old. Okay, yeah. She and Trinita, she says, I think you need to have a purpose that drives you every day. Part of Maddie's challenge was her purpose was completely centered around her son's happiness and comfort, much to his detriment and hers. Yes, let's talk about that. Let me skip down because I really, and for whatever reason, I really got triggered by her relationship with her son, because and we'll pop back up to like her whole thing with Butch and her father or whatever. But I just wanted to think through like what point is Naylor making about the relationship between Black mothers and their sons? Maddie's story, Kendra, you said Maddie's story was heartbreaking. I sympathized with her raising her son alone, but also not understanding why she was so hell-bent on spoiling him against the advice from Miss Eva. Once she realized that after a conversation with Basil, I did start to sympathize with her. Yeah, like I just felt like, and I think that this is also like Naylor making this commentary about like Black sons being really like babied by their mothers, to the point of their own detriment and to their son's detriment, because Basil was really manipulative, and in some ways you could probably argue that like he got it, even though he didn't grow up with his father, like the sort of like passed down to him. But just, you know, like I just started thinking about like even like baby boy, like Tyrese in the womb, like just just not growing up and just not being held accountable. And I have brothers, so I think also just the way that girls are supposed to be like responsible and take care of everything. And then you have like mothers chasing after their sons for like until they're old, like, and so I think personally, just even thinking about my own family history, I really felt like she enabled him so much to, you know, yeah. Dari, don't apologize for the time. I know you pushing out those comments, so thank you. Um, Amani, you said that as long as you have a crumb of a new identity, you can build on a new person, build on the new person you want people to see. It blessed my heart that Maddie feels old, but would only be around 52, 53. But she's been working every day she moved from home. Yeah, and that sort of, I feel like I'm going to offer a spoiler. Her job was quite different in the book than it is in the series. So I was a little bit surprised. She works in a factory in the book, if I'm not mistaken. And so even just how that sort of labor and the way that she sort of like even just her just being described as like she walked 30 minutes home for lunch every day to check on Basil, like how those kind of things can wear on your body. And just the stress of living in a capitalist white patriarchal society, Sherelle, you said Maddie loved her son but didn't raise him. Ooh, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like what you mean? Because I agree, but I would like to hear more of your thoughts about that. Eva was warning her because her kids had run off and left her with the grandkids. Yes. And she didn't listen. Exactly. She was definitely like, I know what it's like to have kids kind of like essentially kind of, brush you aside. And now she's kind of with this grandchild. Fatima, she said, honestly, I think single moms raise their sons from a place of guilt. I think there's a narrative of women raising their sons very differently from their daughters. Immigrant women will tell you about this all day, every day. But single parenthood definitely adds guilt to the way women raise their children, that they want to give their sons what they think they're missing by not having a dad. Ooh, okay. Okay. So do you think that they kind of just, even that whole idea of like, do they just let them kind of be like, they say things like, you're the man of the house and different things like that. And then it kind of adultifies them in a way. And so you're like, oh, well, like they don't even get to grow up, but they're these little men, but they haven't really matured and they kind of get to move in the world in a way that's like, it's weird because it's like you're performing as a child or as a man or taking hold of that then, but you're also not really capable of doing that because we know that our brains don't develop until we're 25. So but yeah, I think that is a good point, like that guilt of being like your father isn't here and so I want you to have this ease. Yeah. Kendra, you said Black boys are reared and this middle child and only girl was raised. That hits. Yes. 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 Oof. I was out here and like I wouldn't even, it's not that I would fault my mom for being harder on me because I could see where it paid off, but I just felt like I wanted to be a kid. Like my mom had me out here like, make sure you apply for all these scholarships but then she was like, I'm trashing my mom. I can't do that. She was out here, writing his scholarships for him, like trying to make sure he gets money. And so it's just like, I think that's the part that kind of hit home for me. Ashley, you said that It is if she wanted to take care of Basil in a way that she believed the world wouldn't take. Ooh, that she wouldn't take care of him. Yeah, I get it. Like you're trying to protect, um, protect the child from. And we know. I mean, we get it, right? Like we see black men gunned down, right? So like that, so we know this. We have that context, and so yeah, it's hard to really fault her in that sense. And yet, there's still that part about like, damn, like kind of manipulative, like you kind of out here, Um, yeah. She treated Basil like a gift. She felt like he was. Yeah. She had a very strange relationship. I mean, just the fact that she didn't even like she let him sleep in the bed at 5. Um, like, yeah, that's just absolutely. Amani, you said absolutely. Even in my own life, I've seen my mom and grandma treat the boys of the family like infants well past 30. Yes, yes, absolutely. The girls get better get it, but by puberty, you better grow up, girl. You best to be on the. You better be out here making moves, paying bills, taking care of yourself. By the time you hit 12, like you get that period, and it's time for you to grow up. And it's like, that's the world sees us like black girls as as adults, and I mean black children in general, but like you start to think about what that means for black girls, and just this idea that we're resilient, or that we can make it through hard times. Like, I have some friends who do like black girlhood studies, and just thinking about like the way that we put that pressure on young black girls, even when we say black women, right? We start using black women, and then we're like, okay, but where are our girls at? Like, what are we talking about here? Yeah, you just said it, girl, Amani. Girls becoming women and boys becoming men are frightening. Different experience I feel in the black household. Dara, you said it would be interesting to think about the historical moment in which Naylor raises the question about black mothers' relationships with their sons. It's during the rise of 1970s and 80s American conservatism. I don't think I have an answer. I don't have an answer for this yet, but I think, ooh, okay, yeah, because I think just thinking about like trying to imagine black motherhood within the context of like the nuclear family, and just um like what is that to like restore the nuclear, like this push in our American like society for that. um Fatima, yes, all that nonsense. It adultifies them, but they don't really have the power of what it means to be a man. It is called enmeshing. Oh, okay, in psychology. So some parents inappropriately attach to their kids, whether by parentifying or adultifying, or by enmeshing with their sons. They want them to be the missing man of the house. They also want them to be their precious boys. And at the end of the day, a lot of women of a certain generation believed men should get their plate served to them. Ooh, yes, that is a read. Okay, thank you. I've never heard of enmeshing, but it's a very it's a slippery slope, right? Like you can't have both. I mean, if you try to, you get situations like this. I'm trying not to sound judgmental, but I don't know. My thoughts are coming out. Maddie's story reminded me. Vanessa, you said Maddie's story reminded me of a recent live with Belinda Bellinger on a live chat, talking about not being a mammy to the world, but also to her own son. Yeah, you can't. Like it's like you're home. You can't have this at home either. Like I'm trying to live mammy free. Like like yeah. So Dara, Fatima asks, what about the 70s and 80s culture stands out to you? And how do you think it may be different from maybe today? It's like, and then you said, it's like our moms struggled, so they expect their girls to struggle. Oh, let me tell you. And that also translates, like, I have some things about grad school, like, even with talking about, like, my graduate school experience and how, like, older generations will feel like, well, I had it hard, so you as a young scholar, you have to have it hard, like, and so we not letting up. And that kind of, it's like, well, didn't you pave the way so that I could have an easier life? Like, isn't that the whole like concept of, I don't know. So I don't know if there's a difference as much as I think that the 70s was a turning point that shaped the current moment. The cutting of society. Oh, yeah, the rise of the carceral state, high unemployment, and underemployment rates. I mean, you get like um, the war on drugs. I mean, you're getting all of this stuff. And in some ways, I think that sort of protectionism might be shaped by the context of like knowing that like these sort of societal shifts um, are making are making Black women and Black families more vulnerable. Um, so yeah. Natasha, the gift was a reference to her conversation Maddie had with her mom, who told her the sin was in the fornication, but the baby was a gift. I think that stuck with her, and she began to overly protect him, which also reminded me of how her father tried to overly protect her. Okay, let's take a shift there because there were some questions that Bree had about the relationship with Maddie and her father. And so I'm going to read what happened. So they were on the cane, in the cane field, and Butch responded to Maddie when she said that Butch had like a bad reputation. And so he says, why? Because I live my life and allow other folks to live theirs. Because if I had a pretty Black girl like you for a daughter, I wouldn't have her nigh on 21 years old and not keeping company, so she's dumb and she don't know her ass from her elbow. What he's saving you up for, himself or hisself. And that's on page 13. And so what are your thoughts about that relationship, like between Maddie and her father? And like what information do we gain about Maddie from her father, Maddie from Butch's question, and how does that shape our understanding of Maddie's relationship with her father? Yeah. Amani, you said, I also think it's interesting to compare Maddie's upbringing to her son's. She was kept under her dad's thumb and kept a bit naive, but Basil seemed to run the streets. Hmm. And she really, I mean, even the fact that she never even said anything to him, like she never asked about his girlfriends, never asked about friends. It was like she was just like, listen, I I don't want to say anything that's going to make this man child go off on me. And I think even just in the movie, like he seemed like somebody who would just be very like easily agitated, and she was just like, I'm just trying to keep the peace, and that is a very scary situation to be in. It's like you're walking on eggshells because you're afraid to, upset this child that you birthed, but not raised. Yeah. It's hard not to be judgmental. I struggled about reading this book because I knew it was gonna hit too close to home. Yeah, I didn't realize that. I think when I watched the show, I was sitting there like, okay, this is hard, to watch, but I guess I didn't really. I think reading it definitely made me feel like, ooh, she is bringing up some things that I haven't really dealt with yet, and the way that I was brought up with two brothers, and so yeah, this is very hard hitting. Dara, yes, when they say we should have it hard, I'm like, as a historian, we should embrace the change over time. Yes, we should, like, I get it. You had to type your dissertation on a typewriter and you had to, go back and erase all the words and stuff like that. And, I know it, I get it, but you got to relax. Like, you know, you got to let it go. Yeah, it's both mean-hearted as well as preparing their daughters for what they think the world has to throw at them. Amani, okay, responded. So Amani says she never wanted to upset her dad, so she did the same with Basil. Ooh, okay, that is a good point. Yeah, like her relationship with her her father definitely yeah, she was always walking on eggshells. And I also wonder if Basil, I don't know, maybe this is going too deep, but like if Basil was sort of like the replacement for her father, like if she was also trying to make him a father figure. Is that reaching? And so she, in many ways, she sort of thought about her son as her father and as her, like just the way that she held him up in such high esteem. I don't know. Maybe that's just going too deep. Um, okay, I mean, Kendra, you said not a reach. Is it possible that she didn't want to find out the truth of his reality? Um, is it possible that she didn't? Who's Basil's reality? Ooh, yeah, because I think that she probably would have felt like um I don't know. I think she would have lost this image of like this perfect son, and I mean that who could do no wrong. And I think that would have definitely made her feel like, I think it would have been a hard reality for her, because I think in some ways I thought, Maddie, you kind of, I don't know. I felt like Maddie was a little what's the word, that delusional, not delusional, but she kind of lived in this sort of like world that, like, she was very detached from her reality in some ways, I felt. um no, she seemed to always have too much to say even as a child. Oh, he seemed to always have too much to say even as a child. Yeah, he was a little feisty. I definitely felt like she had an unhealthy relationship with Basil in her reluctance to date. Yup, little man in the house, and not in a like, weird like pedophilic way. I don't even know that's word, but just even like this idea, like my son is my, everything, and I mean, I think even Miss Eva says like, why are you keeping him in your bed at night? Like, are you trying to? Is it more for you, or is it more for him? Like, is it for him, or is it for you? There was a lot of little reads in this book. Like Butch was reading and Miss Eva was reading. So yeah. Vanessa says, I think the dad and Maddie were both overprotective, but because Basil was a man, he was allowed freedom when he got older. I do think it does bring up a question of the level of privacy and freedom that children should have. And at what point does that freedom or privacy have to be checked by a parent to make sure they're staying on track with their life? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that's especially important to think about. Um, yeah, yeah, because I mean, children, we don't really know what's happening. And I think in some ways you want to resist the surveillance, like to surveil children in ways that are unproductive, because it sort of models like what they are going to always experience in real life, like just to continue on with some like form of surveillance. But in other ways, you like, yeah, I need to know what you're doing. Like, I need to absolutely know where you are and who your friends are. And in many ways, like, it's so difficult, right? Like, I think is you don't want to police your children, right? And in many ways, you understand that like they live in a world where they're heavily policed, and so you may need to make sure that they are that you know what's going on. And so, and I'm not a parent, but I do get it that I do understand, like, you're kind of caught in the middle. Yeah. Yes, like describing kissing his forehead as a replacement for a man in the bed. Yeah, that's a little tricky. Mm-hmm. Yep. He was like Butch, maybe. Natasha, yes. I think he was like Butch. Um in many ways. Very slick mouth, manipulative. So this says add to Brock. Oh my gosh, you all, I am just now figuring out how to add this. Let me just try this out. And if I'm invited back to do this again, if I didn't totally ruin this experience, then I think I will know. Yes. Oh my God. So now I know how to add comments at the end of our time together. So, the world was the rat, and she continued to pacify him from there. She needed him to live in his choices. The world was the rat, and she continued to pacify him from there. She needed him to live in his choices. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't really think she ever did, like, thank you, Kendra. I'm going to add that comment. So, yay, look, we did it. Okay. Now this is just turning into like me adding all the praise. Thank you. Okay. All right. So let's see. Let's talk about Miss Eva, okay? Because she was very feisty. I know that's like probably coded language, but I liked Miss Eva because she opened her home. And this made me think a lot about, again, Black feminist thought. If you read in the middle of the book, I think there's a section on other mothers, and this idea that sometimes in Black communities, like part of Black women's activism is also being mothers to other people that they, to other children in the community, taking people in. And I kind of saw Miss Eva as like a other mother, right? Like she was that person who was like, yeah, I'm here. This is my house. No, you don't have to pay any rent. And I kind of also wondered like why she did that. Like, did she see something in Maddie that was like, that she was a child, and a child that maybe she could pass something on to, especially because her children had left her. And so like, what do y'all think about her relationship with Miss Eva? Mm-hmm. Kendra said that Miss Eva represented how older Black women take care of younger women by providing shelter, love, and advice for us. Black women truly look out for one another. We do. Yes, we do. Mm-hmm. Eva reminds me of my grandma because she always has everyone else's damn kids. Yes. Who are these children? Okay. Yes. And Miss Eva you had her own things, her own issues. There was this whole thing of her kind of, probably maybe, I don't know. Do y'all think that Miss Eva was also like somebody who was like buying into respectability politics? Because she definitely was like, you need to get you a man. And but she also was like, I've been married 5 times. So I think in some ways, again, that contradiction, like she was like, you need to have a man so that your life can be whole. But she was also like, but if they trash, you can divorce them and marry someone else. So I think that's that sort of contradiction that I think Collins talks about in Black feminist thought, about how sometimes women will say certain things that kind of align with very traditional values, and then at the same time they might hold values that are particularly maybe non-traditional, non-conventional. Yeah. Well, it is 4 o'clock, and I am only supposed to be here for an hour, but I will read some of your comments and maybe extend it to, you know, a little past so that I can get all your comments. She said, Imani added to broadcast. All right. I think she wanted to live. She had lived a few times and had some fun, it seems. Oh yeah, she definitely. I mean, even just this idea of she liked all the men's, every single shade and color. Yes. Mm-hmm. I felt like, let's see, Kendra. I felt like Miss Eva's advice to Maddie related to dating was more geared toward Maddie, not centering Basil in her life. When he gets older, she has nothing for herself. Yeah, I mean, she was definitely like, Mama gotta have a life too. I did not expect to reference baby boy as much as I did today. I'm so proud. Mama gotta have a life too. Yes. Thank you so much, Dara. I enjoyed this. You said, I don't know if this was respectability, but it was maybe just a way for her to express that Maddie needed to also live her life, not just for her children. Yeah. Yep. Maddie didn't have a life outside her son. I think Miss Eva wanted her to have a social life for sure. Yeah. Yes. Well, this book was really, I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed reading discussing the first couple of chapters. Again, continue to read along. And also, if you have not gotten the syllabus, we still have a great deal of book to cover. So the next time we have a discussion, you have your syllabus ready, because Bree has a lot of great questions on there. I don't know who's actually facilitating the next discussion, but the next chapters that will be covered is Etta Mae, Kiswana Brown, and I think Lucilia Turner. And so those will be the chapters that we cover. So thank you all for joining in. This was fun. I was so nervous. I got like 5 million screens up. I'm like out here, paranoid, because I'm like, okay, do I have everything sorted out? So this was very fun. I'm so glad that I joined the cohort, and I look forward to more discussions with you all. So have a good one and enjoy the rest of your Saturday, okay? All right, bye.